Approximately 10 months ago, on the occasion of my 8th episode, I elected to focus on the subject of video games and race, owing largely to the controversy surrounding the then-upcoming Capcom title Resident Evil 5. Namely, that its setup involving an armed, uniformed white hero blowing away hordes of rampaging, dirt-poor African villagers was viewed by some to be at best racially insensitive. In any case, in the time between then and the actual game's release, to the expected massive sales and mixed reviews, Capcom saw fit to try and mitigate the swirling controversy by offering up as your sidekick for the game's infrequently obnoxious two-character control scheme, one Shiva, a requisite tough girl type of African descent. Now, with the announcement of a female character, of course, comes the inevitable announcement of unlockable costume choices of the cheesecake variety, since, after all, the only thing gamers love more than a strong woman is a strong woman with a perfect figure and an exhibitionist streak. So then, the eventual sight of Capcom's half-assed attempt at an affirmative action hire giving away secrets even Victoria would keep was to be expected. What wasn't expected was this. For those of you watching on less-than-ideal monitors, this would be the supposed one-woman refutation of Resident Evil 5's racial insensitivity accusations, wearing a leopard skin bikini, war paint, and a necklace made of bones. This, of course, came to light around the same time that some British game journalists claimed that Capcom had tried to impose an embargo on reviews that mentioned both this interesting costume and a now infamous section of the game set in a native village, where you fight not only more African zombies, but African zombies wearing grass skirts and throwing spears at you. Really. Capcom, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know, me and a lot of other gamers went to the fucking mat for you on this one. Don't judge it yet, we said. Wait and see, we cried. Context, we pleaded. And then this? Really? I mean, geez, guys. Yikes. So, yeah, settled. Resident Evil 5, packed with ludicrously dated racial stereotypes. Doesn't make it a bad game, doesn't make it evil, probably does mean that the cause of gaming being taken seriously as an art form is set back another 30 to 50 steps. I am, however, now fully convinced that the problem here is not and never was racism. It's actually much worse than that. Racism is an activity of the conscious mind, a belief and/or viewpoint that can be changed and debated. This points to something more deeply wrong and harder to fix in the psyche of gaming and in the psyche of the world surrounding it.
I want to digress here for a minute, but don't worry, there is a point, I think. Anyway, when I was a boy, I remember a certain book making an odd impression on me. I'm less than certain of the name. I want to say it was called Space Station 7th Grade, but it might not have been. Anyway, the reason it made such an impression was largely because I was always surprised to find a coming-of-age book that was actually for boys. See, I'd inherited most of my age-appropriate reading material from an older female cousin, so let's just say a lot of it was tipped in a rather specific direction. Not that it was all that bad. I mean, in fact, I can offer with some experience that a teenage boy who's looking for ways to relate to girls his own age might find a working familiarity with the complete works of Judy Blume to be very, 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 very helpful. In any case, at one point in this book, the hero, a vaguely dweeby white suburban kid living in then-present 1982, wonders without a hint of irony why his various black and Asian friends bother dressing up in costumes on Halloween since, in his words, they already are something. In other terms, to him, a black guy dressing up as a vampire makes as much sense as a vampire dressing up as anything. It's a quaintly true image, honestly, of the casual racial introversion that was still common among us young white boys back then, but looking back on it now, I think it says a lot more about the way portrayal of race actually works, or rather, doesn't.
See, rest of the world, let me explain something about white people. Our dominance of the Western world and its culture is so fucking monolithic that we don't even notice it's there. To the extent that even the smartest and most tolerant among us tend to subconsciously view our whiteness as a kind of tabula rasa normalcy, and blackness, or all other colors, to be a special difference in and of itself. You can see this play out day after day in the creation of characters, not only in games, but in comics, cartoons, whatever. If a character is white, you can expect him to have some sort of elaborate costume, perhaps a ridiculous haircut, a signature weapon, or pages upon pages of backstory. He needs all those things, you see, because he's white, and therefore a blank state of average normality, whereas if a character is black, you can expect not much beyond that. I mean, take a look at one of the recent lineups for Marvel Comics' The New Avengers. Isn't it kinda interesting that out of these 5 superheroes, the only one who doesn't have a costume or even an identifying logo is Luke Cage over here? Like, nah, he doesn't need a costume. He's black. That's just as weird as wearing a spider print leotard. Now, Comic fans will point out that Cage was never one much for costumes, but come on, if you look at this and you're not steeped in the Marvel arcana, doesn't it kinda look like this would be advertising The Avengers, featuring Spider-Man, Ronin, Captain America, Wolverine, and the Black Guy. Now, with gaming, you have the added elephant in the room that video games come from Japan.
Which, I will once again reiterate, does not mean that all games are Japanese, but that the game culture that still permeates continues to trace its roots back to Japan and Japanese game culture, and if you try to deny this, you're a fucking moron.
In any case, you'd think this would mean that gaming would not be subject to the same casual default to whiteness as other mediums because it's so closely associated with a country that isn't majority white, but no, that turns out not to be the case. You see, Japanese game characters still take most of their design cues from the anime and manga scenes, wherein the curious 20th century Japanese fixation on all things Western has led to a long tradition of their comic and cartoon characters looking, well, overwhelmingly Caucasian a lot of the time. I mean, look, whatever ethnicity everyone from Astro Boy to Speed Racer to Sailor Moon to Mega Man are supposed to be, let's face it,
They look pretty fucking white.
and if that's already accepted in their native country, it's certainly going to be accepted when they're ported over to a country that has already decided that whiteness is a universal ordinary. All of which is great fodder for intellectual exercise, but tends to overshadow what a big, big problem the result of this is. Video games are one of the most prevalent and pervasive storytelling mediums for 2 generations and counting of young people, and, like it or not, what you see in fiction as a child does in fact color your worldview, however subtly, as an adult. And for young non-white gamers, the message they get is as follows: strong white men,
And occasionally morally ambiguous Japanese hardasses,
are the universal good guys, while you are either their targets or their comic sidekicks. The solution, obviously, is to have greater diversity among video game characters. And I'm not talking about the fucking skin tone slider in character creation engines, dammit. That's a fucking cop-out. I'm talking about the licensed and merchandised characters on the goddamn box, in the goddamn tie-in comic, and in the inevitably shitty goddamn Irva Bowl movie. Oh, and ones who are new, fresh characters in their own right, not just the black version of an established white hero. Forcing everyone to play through half the game as Mario's previously unheard-of good buddy Jermaine is just going to piss people off, give the Xbox Live trolls something new to anonymously wax xenophobic about, and reinforce to minority youth a subtle yet insidious notion that they can't do anything until a white guy does it first. Now, that doesn't sound too hard to do, right? After all, game developers, particularly all those granola-munching art school brats in the design department, are a pretty progressive bunch, yes? They'd love to help bring some diversification to the medium, right? That's probably true. You know what else is probably true? Just about the ugliest and hardest to deal with aspect of this whole mess. There's an issue of money. Brass tacks, folks. The American consumer population, particularly in regards to disposable entertainment like video games, is dominated by young, white men. Which means that by and large, what they like is what sells, and what sells is what gets made. It doesn't take much extrapolation to understand how that pertains to the lack of minority game heroes. By and large, people gravitate toward narratives wherein they can identify with the main character.
This is why romantic comedies aimed at women tend to cast pretty but not earth-shatteringly attractive actresses like Julia Roberts and Sandra Bullock. You can't cast Nicole Kidman. Average female audiences hate Nicole Kidman for being so much hotter than they are.
By the same token, video game makers want their game to sell, so it's largely plausible that there's a perhaps unspoken or even unthought of inclination to model most heroes into that which can be identified with by the biggest audience. Hence, game characters tend to be young white men, the if-I-was-older and tougher imaginary self-image of young white men, or the masturbatory fantasies of young white men.
And while it's true that plenty of young white men do identify with, or rather fantasize about being, black characters, it's generally not the sort of black character that makes an especially compelling game hero, unless of course your goal is irony.
Thing is, as much as this possibly theoretical problem sucks, I understand. Games are a business, you need people to play them, but maybe I'm being idealistic, but damn it, I think we could try a little harder on this one. It's the 21st century. If a brown-skinned man can be the biggest movie star of their generation or the President of the United States, I'm reasonably certain they can save a princess or two. And this isn't just an issue for minority gamers. This concerns all of us and the future of the medium. Folks, I love gaming, and I don't want to see it harmed by this the same way that my other great love, film, was. See, for decades, Hollywood essentially ignored or outright scorned the black audience and black film talent. offering them primarily low-budget gangsta cheese or intellectually empty comedies, while the mainstream blockbuster scene was whiter than a chalk quarry, save for the Fresh Prince's mandatory 4th of July mega event. This left a segment of the audience so underserved and aching for product that it allowed this loathsome hack to rise to unprecedented influence. See, sometimes getting a shitty version of what you'd like is better than not getting it at all. Now, I'm generally a peaceful, let's talk it out dude about this stuff, but no. If things don't turn around and as a result we end up with the video game equivalent of this, I might have to stop waxing poetic and start
Hitting motherfuckers, you know?
But there is still hope. This is a future we can avoid, as surely as the Yankees avoid the playoffs or Miss California avoids a milk screening. So, yeah, game designers, those of you hoping to be game designers, help us out here. Do the right thing, and let's get serious about getting everyone into the game.